Hello everyone, the Last Epoch is finally upon us, and today I'm going to give you the ultimate beginner's guide on how to play Last Epoch and get started with no questions. This is going to be by far the best AARPG since PoE, and while the game is still fairly simple, there are a lot of mechanics in the Last Epoch that you definitely want to know, and if you know these, you're going to save yourself a lot of time of researching and asking questions because I'm putting it all in one video for you guys, so that way it's easily digestible and easy to understand. That being said, we're going to get into everything the Last Epoch offers, and if you watch this all the way through, you shouldn't have any questions and should know just about every system in the game front to back. Now, the first thing we're going to do is picking a character class. Now, obviously, you can pick any class you want. You have the choices between a Sentinel, a Rogue, a Mage, a Primalist, and an Acolyte. All have their strengths, all great characters, and all have great potential builds. So don't worry about picking a character that's not good, because in the Last Epoch, that's not the case. All of these characters can all be good, and there's honestly really no bad characters in this game. The one thing you do want to make sure you keep in mind when picking a class, regardless of what it is your mastery. So each specific class has 3 mastery options upon launch. This means once you reach level 20 with the character, you're going to be allowed to pick a mastery, which includes giving you access to extra specific skills. You don't have to understand this or know what this mastery is until level 20, but just keep in mind, once you get to a point, you want to make sure you have a mastery that you like, and you do want to be able to know kind of which one you want to try out and pick, because once you select a mastery for your character, you're locked in. There's no changing it after that. I'll go over how that breaks down skills in just a minute, but again, there's no bad characters. Now, there are 2 separate skill trees in Last Epoch that can get confusing if you don't fully understand them. The first one we're going to go over is the basic one you need to understand when starting your class, which is your passive skill tree. These are going to be your passive skills for your character specifically, and not necessarily your skills. You can see here, looking at the Sentinel character that I have, all of these are individual passives. So first, you're going to start off with this base character passive, and this is what you're going to start investing in before you pick a mastery, and these 3 down here are specific masteries you can go into. Now, all you need to do is select a skill, and as you select a skill, you can see this line or this bar, and as your skill points go up, you're going to unlock more and more actual passives, and once you reach that level of passive, you're also going to unlock that individual skill, giving you the ability to use that skill in your build. Next is your mastery, and this is where you want to be careful. Again, once you pick one of these 3 masteries, you cannot change it later. You're locked in. And what that means is, you can see if I click on Paladin here, once I've selected this mastery, I have the whole area of skills that I can pick from, or the whole area of passives that I can choose. I can choose all of these as long as I meet the proper level requirements and the proper skilling requirements for them. Again, unlocking these skills in the Paladin skill tree. You can also put points in other masteries. So you can see Void Knight here. I have some points in this specific passive and have unlocked this specific skill. And I do use this in my build, which is why this is useful. However, the options you do not pick as your mastery, you can see this chain right here basically tells you can't go past it. So you can still invest in all of these passives before the chain in the masteries that you haven't chosen. That's good to keep in mind, because a lot of builds make the best use of using a lot of the passives in your main mastery skill tree, but also investing in some other passives in these other masteries as well. Now, as you level up the passives from any of these categories, you're going to see you unlock skills that you can use for your character, and these are going to be your primary abilities. Now, the other skill tree is your skills and specializations. The main things you need to know here is you can have 5 active skills at one time. You can see I have these 5 skills down here in my hotbar. This is where you'll select the 5 skills you want to use on a consistent basis and level them up appropriately. Now, again, all you have to do is drag them in here to level them up, but you can see as you level them up, you also get skill trees for your specific skills. And I know at first this is going to seem super daunting and trying to figure out what's going on here. It's not that serious. As you level these skills up, you just skill up your character through these skill trees once you figure out what works best for your build. And if you don't want this skill and you want to change it out for another one, all you have to do is hit Respec here in the top right and do despecialize skill, and it will remove the skill entirely, allowing you to come back to the menu and drag in a new skill. But keep in mind, if you do drag in a new skill, you are going to start having to level that skill all over again. So it's best to find out what skills you want, drag them in, level them up, and not change them unless obviously you find something that works way better for your build. Two things to note here: as you level up your character, you see this minimum specialized level. What that means is, since it's set at level 10, is if I were to respec and despecialize the skill and bring a new one in, it would automatically start at level 10. And this is a quality of life feature Last Epoch has. So as you level up, you don't have to re-level all of these skills from the ground up every single time if you want to switch. And what's great about this is you also have the ability to hit respec and hit remove points. This is going to allow you to take points out of any one of these skills that you want, as long as they're not prerequisites for something further down the chain, and it will remove one of those skill points. But keep in mind, what it's going to do is actually reduce the level of your overall skill itself. So you're going to have to earn that level back to get the skill point back, but this is useful because you're going to be able to respec your skills if you want to change them later at basically no cost. And also, as far as respecing goes, you can respec any of these passives you want from either of your mastery trees by simply going to any vendor with the pink brain icon, talking to them. And then, as you can see here, if I click on a skill, it costs me a certain amount of gold, and it's fairly cheap. And then you can respec that point to anything you want. So you can basically redo everything about your character at any point you want in the game, except for, again, re-choosing which mastery you have, which is why that's so important. Now, one other important thing to mention is idols. So idols in Last Epoch are essentially like charms in Diablo 4. And that means as you go through content, you're going to collect these idols, which all give you bonuses to your character. Now, these smaller idols are going to give you smaller bonuses, but the bigger idols are going to give you much bigger bonuses overall. And you need to find the idols that work best for your build. Now, first, you're going to start with all of these locked and some of your passive points locked for your mastery. You can see at the bottom, it's going to say passive points rewards 15 out of 15 and idol slot rewards 8 out of 8, which means we've unlocked all of these. And these are going to be done through actual quests. So you can see if I click on this quest, it's going to give us idle inventory expansion. You need to make sure you do all the main quests, obviously, so that way you can unlock all of your passives and all of your individual idle slots, because you need every one you can get. Now, there is a ton of loot in Last Epoch. So one big thing you want to make sure you do, especially when starting, is start some sort of organization, because the stash organization potential in this game is unlimited basically, and it's amazing. So one thing you want to make sure you do is, again, start organizing your stuff. One big helpful tip is if you click this button right here, you can drop this down and see these tabs in a vertical preview. For instance, here you can see I've sorted my idols in a stash tab, my weapons in the stash tab by unique, set items, and other items, and organizing other things like my keys, which we can organize later. Now, these stash tabs do cost a decent amount of gold once you start adding enough, but as you reach end game, you're going to be able to build a ton of these stash tabs, and also use the configure tab button to switch your icons and colors to make it a lot easier to figure out where your stuff is at. So next is your items and gear. So there is a huge subset of different gear in this game, and this is one thing you definitely want to know, because if you don't know this, you're going to be confused when all these colors just start popping up on your gear. Now, to start off explaining the gear, each piece of gear has affixes and implicits. So affixes are going to be the things like you can see here that are effects that benefit your character overall, and implicits are other things like the top portion of this weapon, like for melee and spell damage. Those are implicits to the weapon itself. Both of these can essentially be changed with Last Epoch's crafting system, but I want to preface what I'm about to say with that. So there are 7 different types of gear in Last Epoch. First is going to be magic gear, that is the blue color. That means that the item has 1 or 2 affixes, which could be prefixes, suffixes, or both. The rare items are going to be yellow items, meaning they have 3 or 4 affixes, making them better gear. And then we have unique items, which are orange. These are going to be unique items that actually can't be crafted and can only be found the way they are. And these unique pieces have affixes and effects on them that you actually can't craft or find on any other gear. Next are set pieces, which are green. These are going to be armor or weapon pieces that are part of a set. That means that if you wear these set pieces of armor, you have multiple pieces of one set, you're going to obviously get the bonuses for the more pieces of the set you have on. Next are exalted items, which are purple. These are going to be basically the primary items you want to pay attention to as you level. These are items that have affixes, but at least one of those affixes is a tier 6 or tier 7 affix. And what that means is you can see this staff is an exalted item, and you can see the number right here in purple. That means that's going to indicate a tier 6 or tier 7 affix. And the thing about tier 6 or tier 7 affixes, and if you have anything above a tier 5 affix, that means it can't be crafted. These come specialty on these items, and you can't actually craft up this high, making the overall affix special, which is why these items are very desirable. And since you can't get these higher level affixes anywhere else, that's why you want to pay attention to finding gear with them on it. The last 2 items are legendary items, which will show in red. These are going to be the items that are created through the Eternity Cache by visiting a dungeon with an Eternity Cache in it, opening up that Eternity Cache, and basically forging 2 items of the same type together. The two basic requirements are they have to be the same type of item, and what you're going to do is merge an exalted item with exactly 4 affixes on it, and then merge that with a unique item of the same type, such as, for instance, this unique. And as you can see, you're going to merge this with a unique item similar to this, as long as they're the same type of item. And one thing to keep in mind is with unique items, each item has legendary potential. You can see this item has 1 legendary potential, and it can be up to 4 legendary potential being a very rare amount. The way this works is as you put this unique item of the same type and the exalted item of the same type into the eternity cache, once you come back to it, you're going to have a combined item of the two. And since, for instance, this wand has 1 legendary potential, that means one of those stats from that exalted item will be onboarded onto this unique weapon, giving this weapon an extra affix, making it even more powerful than it already is. It can make a lot of weapons much more powerful, although it is a bit of a gamble which affix will actually end up on this item, but it's good for you to know how this works because it is kind of confusing. And I'll go over crafting in just a second, because the crafting system in Last Epoch is something you definitely need to know how to work with, because it's one of the most important parts of the game. Next is something you want to set up immediately when starting Last Epoch, and it's one of the best systems I've ever used in a game, and that is the loot filter. And as you start, you're going to want to basically set this up immediately once you get a couple levels. Now you have to do is go into the settings and go into gameplay, and as you scroll down, you can see the loot filter option right here. Once you manage these loot filters, this is going to allow you to add up to 75 rules and allow you to set up good loot filters so that your screen is not just covered and littered with items that are of no importance to you, such as normal or magic items, because as you level up, they're going to be everywhere and you don't want to have to sort and sift through them all the time. You'll never be able to see anything on your screen. But keep in mind, you can set those up as you level up for lesser items, and it's a must use when playing Last Epoch. Now you can also get a ton of preset loot filters by visiting lastepochtools.com. And this is the Last Epoch site that will have everything you need to know about the game. All you have to do is, if you come to this site, it'll be linked in the description. Simply come to loot filters, which is a new tab. And you can see here, you can click on a lot of presets or regular loot filters. Next, we're going to go over resistances, a very key part of Last Epoch's combat. Resistances in Last Epoch are a primary component of the game. And this is one of the things in Last Epoch you need to pay attention to when building and speccing out your character. As you level your character up, you're going to go into a bunch of different biomes, a bunch of different areas with a lot of different enemies that are going to have different elemental attacks. You need to use idols, gear, passives, and everything you can to essentially max out these resistances to at least 75%. As you can see here, I'm lacking in 3 of them just because I'm swapping my armor. And the reason this is so important is because as you level up and continue to progress through the game, you're going to fight more and more enemies. And if you go against a poison enemy when you have 30% like I do, versus a void enemy where I have the max elemental resistance, this poison enemy is going to do way more damage to me and can potentially 1 or 2 shot me, which is why you need to get all of these maxed out to at least 75 as quickly as you can. And in Last Epoch, that's more than true, that if you don't have good resistances, you're going to die a lot. So this is one thing you definitely want to pay attention to when gearing out your character. Now, crafting in Last Epoch can be especially daunting. Although it does seem daunting, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know, and hopefully you won't be confused whatsoever. You have a couple of different things you can do here. So as you can see, this weapon has 0 forging potential, meaning we have 0 potential to forge on this item or craft it or upgrade any of these affixes whatsoever. So as you can see, this weapon instead has 42 forging potential, meaning we have potential to be able to forge this weapon. In order to do anything on a weapon, you have to have forging potential on it. If it gets to 0 like this staff, that means it's done being crafted on. The item is what it is. There's nothing more you can do. Now, the thing about affixes is there's tier 1 through tier 5. Any tier 1 affix or higher can be upgraded all the way up until tier 5, which is like this chance to ignite affix, which is a max level. That's why we can't currently upgrade it. This one is a tier 6 affix, and anything that is tier 6 or tier 7 means that affix has come naturally on the weapon when you found it. And a weapon having a tier 6 or tier 7 affix again means it's an exalted weapon. As you can see here, this is the chance to bleed tier 6, and that's why the chance to bleed is in purple, which is again what makes it an exalted weapon. Now, tier 3 affixes, again, anything under a tier 5 can be upgraded to a tier 5. So you can see here, we actually have the ability to upgrade this, and in order to upgrade this, you actually need a shard for that specific affix. You're going to find those plenty throughout the game, and I'm going to show you in a minute how you can get very specific ones that you need. You can see the melee attack speed. We have 5 of those shards, and you can see here it shows us we have 5 of those shards, and it costs 1 of them to upgrade this affix. So we can upgrade it as you see here. You can see once we do that, it costs us 1 to 18 forging potential, meaning this number will go down any amount within that range. Again, once it gets to 0, the crafting is done. And also with weapons that don't have full affixes on them or the full 4, you can actually click on and add certain affixes that can belong to that slot, which is really beneficial because then you can pick exactly which ones you want on there to be your additional affixes. And you can see we can select this and basically add this to the weapon. Now, one of the big things to do with crafting is glyphs. So as you play the game, you'll get plenty of glyphs. The easiest way to explain this is these essentially do things to your crafts that you can select between and are beneficial for you. So for instance, the Glyph of Hope, it's going to modify the outcome of a craft, granting it a 25% chance to have no forging potential cost. If you're ever upgrading an affix, you always want to have this equipped. Another very important one is this one, which is Glyph of Chaos. It's going to allow you to select an affix and upgrade that affix. What happens is that affix is actually going to go up a level from tier 3 to tier 4 in this case, but then it's going to be assigned a random affix, and that random affix is going to now be tier 4. So in case you want to change this specific affix, you can just use the Glyph of Chaos. You'll see this will go from a tier 3 melee attack speed affix, and once we roll it, it will now go to a tier 4 critical strike chance affix, which is a lot better for us, and our forging potential went down to 30. You can see it cost us 12 down here, but added a large buff to our crit strike chance. So to get affixes on the gear that you want, that's what you're going to want to do. The other big thing with crafting is having runes. These runes all do a bunch of different things, but the main ones I want to focus on primarily is the rune of shattering. If you have a specific affix, like chance to ignite on hit, and you want specific shards off of a weapon, you're going to use the rune of shattering. What that's going to do is shatter this weapon and give you some shards depending on the tier level each affix is, and essentially add those to your materials so you can use them to upgrade weapons later. This is essentially dismantling weapons to get these shards for each of the affixes, again to save them when you need them. So you can see I can shatter this weapon and it adds shards to my inventory, a random amount depending on the affixes you have on the weapon. Again, all these runes do very important things, but between using glyphs and runes, those are the things you're going to bank on for being able to craft a very good weapon. As you pick up these runes, glyphs, and shards, there is this transfer crafting items button, and what that's going to do is take all of that stuff from your inventory, throw it over into your crafting menu, so that way you don't have to have it clutter up your inventory at all times, and it all gets stored right here. Additionally, there is a guide button right here that explains most of this stuff in detail that you can reference and learn about all of this stuff specifically, because there are a decent amount of options to get used to. Now we're going to go over all the things you need to know about the endgame and exactly how it works. So monoliths are one of the primary endgame activities. Now essentially how they work is as you unlock them, these consist of echoes, which are essentially these small little islands. And as you work outward from these small islands, you're going to gain stability here by completing these echoes. And you can see by completing this one, you can get plus 20 to 60. And as you unlock these, you're going to unlock these echo quests on the left. As you complete those, eventually you're going to get the reward of a blessing, which I'll go over in just a minute. But again, as you complete more echoes, the higher your stability goes, the more of these quests you unlock quicker. Now again, each echo gives you bonuses. If you're farming for something specific, for instance, this echo is going to give us affix shards, and this echo is going to give us gold, and other echoes can give you things like rare body armor or exalted weapons, etc. Now, one important thing to note is the corruption number up here at the top left. You can see, for instance, this monolith is currently corruption 127, and that means a lot of these echoes are more difficult. Once you get far enough outside on a edge ring of the echo, you can essentially finish a corruption echo. And what that does is resets this whole web for the entire monolith and adds that amount of corruption to the monolith itself. You can see this echo makes it more harder by enemies having more health and damage, but at the same time you also get much better loot and more rewards for actually completing them. And you can get to the edge of this web and reset the monolith as many times as you want. But again, the more echoes you do, the more your stability goes up. And once you unlock this third quest and complete all three, upon the completion of the third quest, you're going to get blessings. And you can essentially equip a blessing to your character, and they all give you bonuses. So you can essentially farm out which blessings you want that benefit your character the most. Again, for each monolith offers certain blessings. And as you complete them, you get extra bonuses, such as things like 10% increased experience, percentage increases for specific drops like amulets or specific type of weapons or armor, and a lot of these other things that would generally come as affixes on weapons, but give you permanent access to them as blessings that you can use and have active on your character at all times. Now, one important note here to save you a lot of time, as you start completing these monoliths and you get to these last three rings up here, these 3 level 90 monoliths, you want to complete these before you start worrying about anything corruption related. And this is because once you complete all 3 of these, you unlock the empowered monolith on all of the monoliths themselves, which you can choose, and they automatically start at 100 corruption on each monolith, so there's no reason to farm all these to a level 100. Make sure you complete those 3 and you'll start them at level 100, again giving you better rewards and better blessings. The last big in-game note is dungeons. In order to run dungeons specifically, you will need keys, and in order to get keys, you'll find them through normally running throughout monoliths and echoes. And as you can see, if we use this key, it will take you to a spot on the map where you can run that specific dungeon, or you can run that specific event or arena, which can help you farm specific loot and get access to things that I mentioned earlier, like the Eternal Cache or crafting legendary weapons. These keys are also worth 6,500 gold apiece, so make sure you're picking them up when you get the chance, because if you do ever need gold or you're respecing your character, you can sell these keys for a lot of gold at one time. Different elements in the game actually have stacked bonuses. For instance, if you're using things like fire, ice, shock, etc., you're gonna have a thing here, for instance, that shows a chance to actually ignite or use that elemental ability on the enemy, shown as ignite chance, frostbite chance, etc. You can see my ignite chance is currently 176%. Every time I hit an enemy, that means I will apply at least 1 fire effect on an enemy. That is extremely important to know because there's essentially unlimited stacks you can put on enemies. If my percentage was 250%, that means every time I hit an enemy, I would put 2 stacks on them and have a 50% chance to put an additional 3rd stack. So the higher percentage your chances or afflicting element damage to an enemy, and this works for poison chance, ignite chance, frostbite chance, chill chance, and shock chance. Again, the higher those chances are, the more stacks you can use for elemental damage. And again, these stacks are unlimited, meaning the more stacks you put on enemies, obviously the more damage we're doing. Now, one final thing I want to go over is Last Epoch Tools. This website is definitely a must visit because it has everything and every question you could ever ask on the site, as well as build guides and everything else. It's the go-to site in case you want to figure out a build, in case you want to figure out farming for weapons or blessings or anything like that. This site has everything you need to know, and that's what the whole community uses. So if you haven't already, definitely save that site so you have quick reference to every bit of information you could possibly need on Last Epoch. If this helped you out, drop a like below and make sure you subscribe to the channel and check out one of these videos on the left or the right, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.